Hello, friends. So this is a vloggy-ish kind of video today that I'm going to do, and it's probably going to be long, so I may even split this into two parts or more. And my blinds are now making crazy sounds, so let's see if we can mitigate that somehow. Is that going to work? Probably not. Potentially. Alright. So, a few things that we're going to talk about today. I'm just going to plug my book real quick, in case, you haven't heard of it. I'm going to talk about my blog and a new idea I have for that. And then I want to talk, I promised this like months ago, and it's like a thing I hate talking about. I really actually don't like talking about myself very much. But I want to talk about, just kind of my spiritual path and Reiki and other healing things that I've been doing and why and sort of what's going on there. So, I don't know if I'll remember to put timestamps or chapters because I don't know how to do that. But in order of, whatever, book, blog, spirituality, witchy stuff, Reiki, and sound. Actually, sound, then Reiki. So the book, right? Book edits are done. Typesetting has literally just started, which is like, whoa. Because it comes out in October. I've started getting, some blurbs back. I'm so honored by the folks who said yes, they would look at the book and read it. It was kind of a tight turnaround, so I had to sort of think fast. But hopefully it's gonna entice folks to read the book too. I'm really proud of it, and I'm really thankful for the work that Crossed Crow did on it. Crossed Crow, not Crossed Crow. Crossed Crow did and has been doing, and I can't recommend them enough. If you're thinking about querying them or sending them a proposal, I really, I felt so taken care of, and They brought me into every part of the process. I was, actively involved with the creation of the cover. I love our cover. Gabby did an amazing job. Gabby's working on the typesetting now, and, they brought me into that. She said, what do you want to see? And I said, I have one crazy idea that probably won't work, and it won't. But other than that, I said, if you do what you did to the cover, to the inside of the book, I think people are going to pick it up and feel like this is dope, and it is. So I haven't seen the insides. I haven't seen the insides yet, but and I'm actively working on what the next book is. I know now kind of where I'm going with it. I'm doing a book proposal for this one, which I've never done before, so that's kind of a new thing for me too. Because it's typically I write the book and then make the decision about what I want to do with it next. In this case, I'm enjoying my relationship with Crosscrow, so just gonna propose it, and if they don't want it, I'll propose it elsewhere. But I think it's cool. I think it's fun, but I'm not ready to talk about it yet. What I am ready to talk about writing-wise... Oh, I'm sorry. The other thing about the book, the current book, Modern Fortune Teller's Field Guide, available for pre-order anywhere you can pre-order books. Bookshop.org is one option. And of course, your indie local bookshop, right, or your local new agey witchy shop, right? Get in there and support them. Ask them to pre-order it for you. So yes, October 2025. The blog. So the blog I've done for a year. A lot of folks didn't even know I had it, which is fine. It was something I enjoyed doing for a year. And I'll probably do a couple more posts, and I'll probably update it from time to time. But when I did my most recent post, I asked sort of where do I want to take this next, and it sort of, you can read the post, the link's below. It sort of said, yeah, you're different now than you were a year ago, and it's time to focus on something else. And I do want to focus on something else, not tarot. Like, I want to stay with tarot, but I'm thinking about, like, exploring tarot with other modalities in terms of magic, in terms of Reiki, in terms of sound, right? These other things that have been on my radar at the moment. And I want to talk more about spiritual stuff too, even though that is a topic that I'm not that comfortable engaging on. I'm going to talk a little bit about it today, and it's a topic that's become increasingly important to me. It's one of the ways I feel activated in the world. So anyway, that's why I sort of have said, okay, the Fool's Journal, that part of that blog or that part of my writing, is concluding or mostly wrapping up. But then I also, in that reading, got the idea from the reading to see if there are folks in the community who are right curious. You know, they want to try it out. They want to see how it feels to work with a blog, to work with an editor, etc. And so my idea now is, you know, if you're a person in the tarot or divination landscape who kind of gets what I do here, right? The kinds of things I care about, my politics, if we want to put that word on it. But also, you know, you want to just give it a go. I think what I'm going to do is ask for submissions, and I know a couple folks reached out after reading the blog, and I want to see how that goes. So, I'm going to put up a form on my website, which I will link below, and it will just be kind of like a query form, really. And all the instructions for this are on the most recent post of my blog, so I won't try to remember them all now, but don't write the post yet. All I want to do is sort of see, I want to see like a 1 to 3 card reading, like 500 words max, I think is what I said. Check the blog. Just to, on the question of like why you're a good reader, what your divinatory strengths are, something like that. Again, check the blog. Really, I just want to make you write 500 words about why you're cool using tarot, right? So I just want to get a sense of where your writing is. Not as a gatekeeping thing, just knowing kind of what your style is, what I may need to coach. And I have a very sort of decolonized approach to editing. I'm not here to like revise out who you are, your vernacular, your slang, right? It's just clarity. All I'm interested in clarity. So yeah, so check out the blog. I will post the form both on the blog and here, and sometime, and I'll post on Instagram too. I'll put up a post when the form is ready, just because I'm saying I'm going to do it, and I know I'm going to get distracted, because one of the things that's changed is that I've decided to go off my ADD medication because my doctor has decided to treat me like a child. So, my attention span is, it wasn't all that well corrected by what I was on, but it helped a little bit. So anyway, so that's the blog. So I'm thinking, and we'll see how that goes. It's probably not going to be a weekly thing, maybe more of an every other week / monthly. But I like the idea of just giving a person, who's like, I kind of want to get into writing for tarot or divination, and I just want to like have the experience. And I don't have no views, right? I'm not a superstar out here, but I have a little bit of an audience, and friends who I hope will help spread the word on new writers who are sharing. I thought I saw something fly above me. That would have been crazy because I'm inside. See, the attention span. Anyway, spread the good news, as it were, about new writers. So that is where I'm at right now. What would the posts actually be? Just what I did for the blog for a year. What is today's lesson on divination? And then you just pull the cards and whatever spread, whatever combo, however you want to do it. And then you just interpret the cards as a lesson on being a tarot reader, or being a diviner, or on something adjacent, right, to our field. And I focused on tarot, but it doesn't have to be tarot. It could be Lenormand or oracles or anything else. I bone reading, whatever. Yeah, that's it. So that is the blog. That's the book. So next up, we're going to talk about spirituality a little bit. And again, this isn't my favorite thing to kind of talk about personally. I feel like it's a little, I don't know. There's sometimes putting things in words actually makes them less special. And while I share a little bit of my work on Instagram and stuff, I do think like to... all right, I'm gonna pause. I have to pause this, so we'll see if this becomes 2 videos or not. But hold on one sec. It just gets to a point, y'all, where like even making simple videos, I have technical issues these days, and it just makes me not want to make videos very much. Part of this is having old tech. I remember when Macs were like tanks, and they last for like 20 years. Mine is a 2017, and it can't hold more than 10 minutes of video memory. Anyway, hi, welcome back. Ironically, I was going to talk about spirituality, not bitch about tech planned obsolescence. So, what do I want to say about this stuff? Why am I even talking about it? I think that the reason that I wanted to talk about it, and it's taken me a while, and I think I proposed this, sharing this with you like 6 months ago, if not more. It's what's been getting me through lately, the last year, really. I mean, I'm not going to get into kind of the personal stuff from last year, but there's really nothing that's been great about the last 8, kind of since I left grad school. Not much great. Things have seemed great and then turned out not to be. So, anyway, last year really, really uniquely rough in its own particular ways. And part of that was my journey with trying to get tested and even seen to be tested for ADHD, etc. This had started well before that, but I'd avoided any kind of spiritual anything for most of my adult life because the spirituality of my childhood was so traumatic. And I want to say this, right? Like, I recognize that not everyone has a traumatic relationship with Christianity, but I did and do. And so what I really just wish people who are Christians could stop doing is saying that, right? Saying, well, I didn't have, and I'm not a, like, anytime anyone is talking to you about the experiences of their problems, the defensive, like, response from your pal is never helpful. Well, not all Christian, like, you know what? Christians in this country hold all other faiths responsible for their most single extreme people. Usually those people got extreme because of Christian colonialism. So shut the fuck up, I guess, is where I'm going with this. And I know you mean well, but it's not helpful to anybody. It's equivalent to saying, don't worry when someone's having a panic attack, right? So listen, I get it, and I'm glad it is serving you well and that you have a bond with it. I'm really happy for it, but many, 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 many of us equate it with homophobia, racism, justified our entire erasure as humans. So it was really rough, and I was a believer when I was a kid. Mostly now I think it was the drag of it all. So anyway, when I left, and I had a very sharp moment when I was a teenager, when I was about 19, 18. No, I was still in high school, so I must have been 17, 18. And that was when I found tarot around that time. And I also then kind of I dabbled in witchcraft. And it was that very kind of Scott Cunningham thing. And it just did, like, I liked the nature stuff of it, but it was just, and I really liked Scott Cunningham's work. I liked it at the time. I understand that, now we sort of look at a lot of it as appropriative. But again, he didn't have access to the same kind of anti-racist theory that we do now. Right. Now, I'm not one of those people who's like, it's a different time. But there are people in the community today who are still appropriating, right, and who are alive and know better. And Scott isn't. He didn't have the opportunity to grow, right, in this way, is what I'm saying. Anyway, it just didn't do it for me, and a lot of the people I found in the community were just as irritating as Christians. So I stayed away from it. I stayed away from all of it, other than tarot, and just didn't like it. And then kind of in the last sort of post, in what we'll call the Trump era, I guess, which is kind of a misnomer and gives him too much credit. He's just a symptom of the disease that is us in this colonial country. Where am I going? Exploring magic as a spiritual form of justice. And that was when I found hoodoo, which may or may not be considered a closed practice. I don't want to get into that here. That's not really the point of this. what I want to talk about it though is that it was the first kind of spiritual encounters that I had. This fucking lines, where sorry, where magic and spirituality was about justice, right? Rebalancing the scales. You fucked me, now I'm gonna fuck you, kind of thing, and not even like it's a system that's born out of oppression, right? And so it has at its core liberation. And that's what I started learning from it. And it's a tricky thing to learn about. A lot of what's written historically comes from white people. And so it's riddled with white gaze. And oftentimes even the kind of transposition into words of dialect, in like the oral history projects that recorded these things. But that's changing to a certain degree, right? As newer work comes out by people who are in that world and in that community and have a heritage of it. It's not mine to practice, right? It's not, and that was never really the intent. Although I did benefit a lot from it, and I have made its kind of justice-centric viewpoint the core of my own spirituality. Sherry Schoen, or that Hoodoo lady, wrote a book called Hoodoo for Everybody, which was a really nice way of understanding what was appropriate, or one person's view of what's appropriate. It's sort of a hoodoo for everybody, predicated on the idea that if you are a white practitioner of it, you are centering the struggle, of liberation for those impacted by white supremacy. And so that was a really informative journey, and I learned a lot from it. I learned a lot about magic, and there's a lot of overlap between it and witchery, folk witchcraft, which is where I'm sort of segueing into talking about now. And part of that is appropriation, part of it's not, right? Part of it is sometimes good ideas are good ideas and they just arrive, on different parts of the planet in the same way, or at the same time, or in different places in similar fashions. So it was through that I sort of then found like what is now known as folk witchcraft or folk witchery or folk craft. And there are lots of names for it, and there are lots of different branches of it, because it's not a dogmatic, it's not a centralized, it's not Wicca. And it has a lot in common with Hoodoo because it is centered on the margin, right? And what it does essentially as its root is it looks back at the transcripts of witch trials and anti-witchcraft books and whatnot, and says, what if we look at these as instruction manuals rather than accusations? And I love that, right? Like, talk about reclaiming it, saying, oh, this is what they said we could do, and here's how we did it. How close can we get to recreating that? Which is, to me, very, very, very cool. And we know a lot of what is in those texts is bunk, right? But that doesn't mean that there isn't access to something deeper in there, right? As though somehow, the old witches of yore were like, we'll find a way to make sure this shit survives. And I think that that's something that ancestors in all traditions do who experience marginalization. And so, another thing that I like to bring up is that not only did the witchcraft trials sort of come out of Europe, but one of the reasons why was the slow colonization of Europe by Rome. So a thing that I think is helpful for a lot of white folks in the United States to remember is that we are displaced too, and that's not an excuse to center that, right? Because obviously that's a very different journey. The point being, though, we should be equally as angry about the displacement of indigenous peoples, because it was Christianity that colonized Europe and pushed let's clarify that. Pushed the old ways down, right? And then pushed different Christian sects out. So that's what caused colonialization. It wasn't that the witches were finding new homes. It was that the Christians were. But it was because Christian Group A didn't like Christian Group B, so Christian Group B had to fuck off and steal land elsewhere. So the point of that, though, is like, as displaced people, we have a responsibility, I think, to like fucking care about that, right? To care about colonialization and to care about the erasure of what were once indigenous spiritual ways for our European ancestors. And again, I am not comparing this in any way to the trauma, the genocide of what founded this nation, right? I'm just saying that we should be allies, we should be co-conspirators, as a result of that, because we too should understand what it means. We have been taken in a way against our will from where our roots were too. Again, I really, really want to underscore I am not, I am not comparing this to the slave trade. This is not enslavement, right? It's a very, very different thing. But the thing that I want to get to is the marginalization. And that's, I guess, what I discovered through this practice or through reading about like folk crafts, right? Just to use, or what I call witchery. I don't know who I got that from, but I just sort of call it witchery. And if I were to sort of say I had a title for my practice, I would just say it's witchery. It was understanding, right, these people were marginalized, right? Not by the witch trials. That happened already. Like, it was as the old women were pushed to the sidelines in society, as the midwives and the healers, right, were pushed to the edges of the community and then started to be looked at as scary, as demonic, as the devil, as, all of that shit. And then I thought, that's what queer people are today, right? That's what people who try to engage in social change are today. We're the devil to the eyes of like the controlling masses. And then I said, that's really powerful, right? Because the devil is the thing that I was taught to be afraid of when I was a kid, but in fact I'm the devil, right? In the eyes of my church, in the eyes of the church that I grew up in. So are all my friends. So that's to me what it is to be a witch, right? Is to be the villain in someone else's colonial story about the world. And from there, if we let go of like the unfairness of having been pushed out, like I used to have a very like, it's not fair, like, I used to, like, one of my internalized misogyny tactics was like, well, straight women don't know, right, like what it's like to be a gay man. And to a degree that's actually true, right? But of course gay men don't know what it's like to be a straight cis woman. So like we shouldn't really, at least as white people, like play that level of specificity in terms of intersectionality, but you get where I'm going with this. I used to use that as an excuse to be like, I am more oppressed than you are. Anyway, when you get past that, it's like everyone on the margin is seeing the injustice, right? And we all experienced injustice because we were pushed to the margin. And so we should be collectively united in resisting, right? So witchcraft to me, or witchery to me, suddenly became a way of describing the what I always kind of think I knew was that my religious belief or my faith had to mesh with my political beliefs because they weren't ever any different. And then I started learning and thinking about how that margin is very powerful because we can see things from the margins that other people can't, right? And I frequently talk about how intuition is just, it's part of our fight or flight system, and people who grew up marginalized or endangered in some way are usually more intuitive, and I think that that's true. And here's another example of that, right? Like, there is magic at the margin. And so my spiritual practice became a magical practice that was focused on liberation, right? On using magic to impact not just manifestation, and I do use it for myself, certainly, but primarily almost at like a 8-to-1 ratio is I'm doing work when I'm doing work, and I call it work. That's something I take from Hoodoo, the idea of doing like spell work as work. Madame Pemita said this, and I think it was really smart. She said, there's a reason it's called work. It's you don't just light a candle and set it aside. If the candle isn't burning the way it needs to, if it looks like it's going to go out, then you carve away the wax. You work on the candle. You know what I mean? Like, spirituality is work. Magic is work. Spell work is work. It's not, yes, a candle is a relatively passive way to do it. A lot of the work for us as witcherers is is in the front loading of the magic, right? The candle kind of takes that and sustains it, but you get my point. So that's kind of where my spirituality has taken me, right? Is that magic, witchcraft is a tool that can be used, but is, to, as what am I trying to say? Get the sentence out. It's one way. I'm going to talk about Reiki and sound healing, and I think this is going to be another video. But I'm going to talk about that stuff, and those are called complementary therapies, right? To me, magic or witchcraft is a complementary practice to liberation work, right? And so how else do I try to do that? I try to do it in my writing, I try to do it in what I talk about, etc. So those are ways that I activate my spirituality. Could I do more? Sure. I try to put my money where my mouth is. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I fail. I'm just not a person who has the nervous system that allows me to go to a protest, right? I just can't do it. I can't. I have a hard enough time feeling safe at the grocery store. So this is like a nice segue to where I want to talk about in the sort of evolution now of like spirituality as healing. So like, I guess what I'll say is that I knew I learned and discovered and learned to feel very strongly that a witch who can't curse can't cure. That was like the big thing for me. I was like, oh, all that threefold path stuff? No. It's actually our job, right? And the more privilege we have, I think the more risk we got to take magically to activate our liberation theology, right? To borrow a phrase. So that's sort of it's. So I guess yes. Now I would say, am I a witch? Yes, I identify that way. It's not a word I really use to describe myself much. I in many ways think labeling ourselves is problematic too, only because then it becomes projected into social media and like public spaces as a brand, and it's not really anymore kind of a thing of who we are. Not to say that we can't do that, and obviously I just wrote a book about being a fortune teller, but again, that book is kind of more about the idea of what that means, and it centers a part of the divination community that was scapegoated in the last 40 years. So ramble. Who's gonna watch this? I don't know. Anyway, I hope this is interesting to you. All right, I'm gonna pause this and I'm gonna do the next part in another video. So take care, be good. We'll talk soon. And if you stayed with me this far, thank you, and look forward to the next one.